What's up, guys? Saf here on SuperSaf Speaks. Welcome to episode number 40 of the podcast alongside my co-host
Thunder E from Board at Work.
And we've got a packed episode today. We've got some more Galaxy S25 Ultra leaks. Both had the iPhone 16 Pro Max for almost a month. We're going to round it up. few days just short of a month, so we're going to call it a month, and we're just going to talk about our thoughts and our experiences using the iPhone 16 Pro Max, the Samsung Galaxy S24FE, which was a bit of a surprise, came to us, and we've been using it for about a week now, so we can share our thoughts on that. And we have to talk about the Huawei Mate XT as well. I mean, what a device that looks like. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So, Enebong.
Yes.
Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra. We've had some fresh leaks from OnLeaks and Android headlines. Full 360 renders, high quality leaks here. Last time when we covered this topic, we saw the front of the device and we saw the smaller bezels, the flatter edges, the curved corners. But now it looks like we can finally see what the back of the device is going to be looking like. And I think this might be a little bit disappointing for a few people because essentially it looks the same. We've got the triple ring design, okay? Now, I don't mind the triple ring design. What about you, Enebong?
I don't mind it either, but you got to change it up. You got to change it up. I mean, we're going to go through the same thing with Apple that we did just recently, so.
S22 Ultra, S23 Ultra, S24 Ultra. Now the S25 Ultra is going to have that same triple ring design, right? Now, again, I'm not saying it's bad, but we've had it for a while now. I still stick to the fact that the S21 Ultra design was something that, I really liked, and I think they should have maybe carried that on for a little bit, or maybe bring something back just to change it up. But currently, as far as we can see, Ice Universe has also leaked some cases. Case manufacturers are the best, man. They be leaking devices months ahead. It's like, obviously they need the info to be able to prepare the cases, but then, here we have all the cases. So we've seen some of that. So from the design, now we've got like a full 360 view. I like what the front looks like. I like the sides and everything. The back, again, it's arguable, depends what everybody else thinks. But what's more interesting is what's on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like when you're referring to somebody who's like not very good looking, you're like, no, it's the inside, the inner beauty.
It's all about that inner beauty. Just let it out. Let it out.
Exactly right. So, firstly, Ice Universe has said that there's going to be 16 gigabytes of RAM. Okay, and then more importantly, we've had some leaked benchmarks. Now, Enebong, being the gaming man, right? What do you think of these early benchmarks? We're looking at a single core score of around 3,000, like 3,011 we've got, and then we've got a multi-core score which is like almost 10,000, right? Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's some sort of reference there for Dragon Ball Z over
9,000. Over 9,000. Yeah, it is over 9,000. Yes.
Let's insert that in there, editor. Go on, throw that in there.
Vegeta, what does the scouter say about his power level? It's over 9,000! What, 9,000? There's no way that can be right.
All right. Well, what are your thoughts based on thing? It looks like we're going to have the Snapdragon 8 Gen 4 for Galaxy, which kind of we were expecting. But seeing these benchmarks, what are your thoughts?
There are many thoughts to this, but first of all, thank you for that DBZ reference there. That was cued in quite well. This is a very good, impressive number because, and don't quote me guys, I could be wrong, but I think this is also one of the first times that a new, we believe, Snapdragon chipset, it has that leap over the very last, Apple A18 or 9, whatever, A series chipset. The other thing too is, at least for me, is and now Android manufacturers can literally, quote unquote, bring those console level games. There should be nothing holding it back. The idea that Apple had, Resident Evil, the Assassin's Creed, all those games which is really cool to have and also a nice talking point. But now we can have this also. We could have had it in the past, I believe, but this is just a very clear statement. What this also adds is the fact that in terms of just general performance on the device, it should be a breeze for everything. And also some of those AI capabilities on board. The reason I mentioned this is because, and we'll talk about this later with the S24FE, is the fact that, Samsung has a feature of doing a lot of the AI capabilities on the device. You can actually set it on. So with these kind of benchmark numbers, we should hopefully see more on-device AI, which also adds to more of that security element, which Samsung can tie into Knox and, all those things. There's so many advantages to these kind of high numbers, which as a gamer, I'm just super excited to see it. So hopefully we get some really impressive games, maybe a new Dragon Ball Z game that they can use some of this to quote on.
So from looking at my benchmarks for Geekbench on the iPhone 16 Pro Max, single core score is getting close, but it's not there. It's the multi-core score that's higher, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if I look right now at my iPhone 16 Pro Max, single core score, I'm getting about 3,290. So this is 3,011. So still a little bit off in single core performance. But when it comes to multi-core performance, I've got around 8,000 on the iPhone 16 Pro Max. But what we've got leaked here would be, getting towards 10,000. So 9,706 is what we've got on the leaked specs. So yeah, single core performance is still not going to be quite at the level of the A18 Pro from Apple, but multi-core score is quite significant.
And you have to think of it from this perspective. What does Android do well? It runs a lot of applications in the background at the same time, which is what multi-core is beneficial for, I'm not saying that iPhones don't do that, but iPhone has a very different system of doing things. So for Android devices, this is great. It means you're going through apps more efficiently. You can also open up heavy applications, game, all that fun stuff. To me, it's impressive. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I mean, it's looking exciting for the S25 Ultra. Leaks are coming, every week. So again, in the next episode, we'll be sure to cover the latest updates. So stay tuned for that.
Quick one on the leaks. So how we mentioned earlier about the back and how it looks similar, right? Yeah. It's something that Samsung could easily fix and turn into. How we talked about having a P design or something like that, because they could just basically put a frame over the camera lenses and call it new, or make it like a rectangle across and be like.
Yeah, who knows what they'll do, but they've already done a lot of this stuff, like when I look at the Note 20 Ultra, right? Okay, so you had that rectangular thing there, and then obviously with the S21 Ultra, you had, maybe manufacturing that was quite difficult because it kind of melted into the edges, which I think looked really cool, and it was my favorite design device, I believe, of that year. Because we've said this before, but there's only so much you can do with a rectangular slab, right? So how creative can you get? But it would have been nice to have seen something a little bit different. I don't think things are going to change because we're 3 months away now, roughly. So it's very unlikely that these leaks generally are pretty accurate at this point in time. So I don't think things are going to change. But let's see. As I said, we'll be keeping up with all of the new updates. Right, iPhone 16 Pro Max. We pretty much got it, a couple of days after we've got similar. Actually, no, I have the other speaking case. I have the clear one.
Okay.
You've got the. I really like that one, by the way.
Yeah, I do too. It's pretty nice.
The only thing with that one is the camera control button is not it's just a gap, isn't it? It's not the sapphire crystal. But we got it pretty much a couple of days after the launch event, and we've been using it. We've been doing lots of videos. You must have seen lots of camera comparisons, things. We're going to talk about things one section at a time. So initially, I'm going to talk about the design. It looks exactly the same as the iPhone 15 Pro Max, which looked pretty much the same as the previous one. It's been the same design. There's actually been times where I've picked up my iPhone 15 Pro Max thinking it's the 16 Pro Max, and I'm like, oh, hold on, this is not the right one. And then I'm like, okay, because even though it's slightly bigger, it feels the same. Okay, so maybe that's an advantage because we do have that larger screen, right? So it's a 6.9 inch, but it's not something that you really notice if you're coming from the 15 Pro Max. Now, if you're coming from maybe the 12 Pro Max, I would say, or 13 Pro Max, maybe you're going to notice that larger display change and stuff. But right now, I mean, like I did not really notice that difference. I mean, the design's good, don't get me wrong. I like the titanium. Desert titanium looks like a bit of a gold. I personally still would stick to the black titanium or the natural titanium, but then it doesn't look too different compared to last year. What are your thoughts on the design?
I will quote my wife on this. She picked it up and she said, I'm not upgrading. Just from the design. Because she's like, it's the same as my old phone. I feel no difference. And similar to what you said, the design is very, very, very similar, other than the fact that there's the camera control button, on there. In terms of colors, though, I was a bit disappointed with the desert color. It didn't feel deserty enough in my mind, and I kind of missed like the blue from last year. That was pretty cool color to have. I think overall, design-wise, I do like the extra height. Because it's a little bit taller than, the 15 Pro Max from last year. But again, it just feels very familiar is the key word there to use.
I'd agree.
Yeah.
I'd agree. Now, you mentioned the camera control, and that's the second thing I want to talk about, camera control button. I've called it a button from the start. I know Apple don't like calling it a button, but it is what it is. It's a button, right? Okay, so when I was testing it, this is my experience with the camera control. I've initially, obviously, because testing it, I was trying it out quite a bit. So, I was like, okay, yeah, I kept reminding myself to use it. However, 4 weeks on, I don't really feel like I need to use it unless I'm taking pictures in landscape, right? So if I've got the camera like this, then it's perfect. And I'm like, oh yeah, let me do that. So, we had a birthday, so in the family, so I was taking some family pictures, and then I started using it. And I was like, oh, brilliant, this is here. When it's portrait, I just don't find it like, it's so much easier for me just to take pictures as I normally was, right? Rather than doing this. And, if I do use it, my usage is when I'm in landscape to take pictures, launch the camera, take pictures. Am I using it for anything else? Am I using it to switch between different lenses? No. It's just easier just to do that on the screen. That's been my experience with the camera control. What about you?
It's similar. I will say though, like, so for instance, my sister-in-law's birthday is basically this week, so we had it this weekend, and we had to take a group photo, and that's the first time my brain went camera control, because I literally picked it up and I forced myself down here, but normally I don't really use it at all, other than during the testing period. I've tried to use it, and it made me wonder what what new camera features, not just Apple, but just manufacturers add in that stick in my head. And I know we're talking about Apple, but I have to say this, I felt like I needed the Pixel because I could take the picture of everybody and then add myself.
Yeah.
That's just what naturally came to my mind, even though I tried to use camera control. And I think one of the things with camera control is it's easy, you're right, to take that in landscape, and if you're taking photos that way. If you hold it in portrait, it's almost difficult. I've got big hands, so my fingers don't even get there. The other aspect to that is also the fact that it's not comfortable for your brain. Like the muscle memory to remember that continuously kind of disappears because you're going, I'll go away. I've always stated, look, I'd rather they made it like a second action button that I could do something else with it than necessarily just camera control.
Yeah. I think, as I said, launching the camera and stuff is fine, but then I can't see myself being like this and then doing this to try to switch between stuff when I'm trying to take the picture. It's just so much easier for me just to do it, like this on screen. So that's what I would say with the camera control. Landscape photos, brilliant. Anything else, I'm personally not finding myself using it much. On the topic of that, cameras. Now, cameras, I think they're pretty tried and tested. We've got some very good quality cameras. I find that they are pretty flat, the pictures, and I think they've deliberately done that so then you can add the photographic styles, right? So, you'll see some examples on screen that I did during my camera comparison, but I just find them to be very flat. And then it's just like, okay, this doesn't look too great. And I get it that you've got the photograph styles. Now, the thing with the photograph styles, I really like them. They give you lots of customization. They're not just like applying a filter. However, you can't just set a particular photographic style and shoot everything with that, right? So you can't just do an amber look and then shoot everything with that. I think different situations look different based on what you're trying to shoot. So you can't just have a blanket photographic style for everything. So I kind of still shoot at standard. And then if I want, I go and tweak later on. But that's kind of how I've had my experience. Having said that, Very happy with the images that have come out from the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Very comparable to other devices that you've got. Portrait mode especially, I think, is one of my favorites. You know, the edge detection is just insane. Picks up random strands of my hair. So that's something that I've been very happy with.
All the gray? Is that what you're saying?
All the gray. You know what it is? When it comes to portrait mode, some cameras really struggle. And this is why I keep my gray hair, which is covered with a cap, because I'm having a very bad hair day today. But anyway, that's the reason why I don't dye my hair, actually. It's purely for these camera comparisons joke. Anyway.
No. He doesn't dye his hair. He just he actually forces the gray out so that you guys can see it. Because normally he doesn't have gray hair. This is just it's a choice by Saf for you.
But yeah, you know what I mean? Like it's one of those things that actually it works out, because when you're doing a portrait mode test, some cameras can really struggle because gray hair is obviously very difficult to cut out, whereas black hair, it's like quite sharp and it's like, okay, all right, this is where you need to cut it, right? But I find that the iPhone is like amazing, probably got the best edge detection, I would say, of any smartphone that I've tested personally. So that's what I would say when it comes to the photos, right? We'll move on to videos shortly, but what are your initial sort of thoughts on pictures?
I agree with you that it's a bit flat. I feel photographic styles is implemented to solve, at least for me, some of the problems that iPhone had last year with the 15 Pro Max was, especially with my skin tone. You're looking at me on camera, you can see that, yes, I'm black, but I have different complexions. The iPhone made me one set color of chocolate. That's what I look like in all my photos last year. And even this year, it still does that to a large degree. And when I pick a photographic style that I like, everything just kind of just balances all out. But I agree with you can't shoot that way throughly. Like if I was just shooting myself, or I was just taking pictures of me, or me and my wife, or me and my son, then yeah, sure, but I'm taking pictures of many things. I wish there's a way you could cycle quickly options, like, you know, when you're in the camera, you have your select photographic style that you want, and you have a second one maybe for just scenery, and you can easily tap and cycle it. That might add a little bit more contexture, but it also reminds me that this feels very on Apple, because it's now making it less simple to take a photo, if you get me. You know, rather than the normal, you pick up an iPhone, you take a photo, and then that's it. But overall, I agree. The camera does a really good job. Portrait is fantastic. Photos really come out pretty well. I think iPhone does one thing that other cameras don't do as well, is that even if, for instance, I may not like myself in the image, the iPhone does a good job of making the whole image look good. You know, you look at it at a glance, you go, okay, yeah, this is a very good image. And then you can nitpick in between here and there, while other cameras will focus on one aspect or another. So I definitely like the fact that the iPhone still keeps that intact.
So one thing that you mentioned there, right, which was switching between photographic styles, that's what the camera control lets you do, man. You can set it so then you can switch between the different. So you're not using it correctly, man. That's what you need to do.
But see, that's the thing. It's too difficult. I won't reach it, right?
Yeah.
Rather than me just going there to do that right way. So.
But again, I think that's an extra step. Like I'm happy to just let the camera figure it out, and then, you know, but you do have to go in later on. That's one thing. The ultra-wide camera, I mean, it's high resolution, but honestly speaking, like I still, you know, prefer the ultra-wide camera of other cameras. Like for example, the Pixel, it's got a wide-angle view. I prefer that. Mm-hmm. The Samsung does do some post-sharpening, right? But sometimes that looks actually better, because I find that the iPhone can be a bit, you know, too soft. And in low light as well, the ultra-wide camera is not the best in low light. And, you know, some people have actually done tests comparing it to the iPhone 15 Pro Max, and, you know, saying that it's actually taken a bit of a step back when it comes to low light in terms of detail. So that's something that I've not been hugely, I mean, it's a good camera, don't get me wrong, but, you know, it's something that I was hoping, oh yeah, we've got 48 megapixels, it's going to be a big step up. That's not something that I found personally.
I agree.
Now, video. 4K 120 frames a second. Now, I actually want to clarify this, because I've had so many people just kind of like say, oh yeah, but other cameras have done this, right? This is 4K 120 FPS with Dolby Vision HDR, right? Okay, there are not other smartphones that I am aware of that can do HDR at 4K 120 frames a second. And the way this records it as well, you don't have to just be in the slow motion mode. You can just record videos normally, and then you can slow them down after the fact, you know. I think when it comes to 4K 120 FPS video, the iPhone 16 Pro Max is currently the best that I've tested, right? I've not tested every single camera out there, but I would say.
Dude, it's forget the Dolby. I don't even care about that. The stabilization on that thing. I recorded it against the Galaxy, and the Galaxy image, if I was stationary, would look absolutely great. Because I was chasing pigeons, and the iPhone just looked like it was like a John Woo movie, right? While the Galaxy looked like Michael Bay with extra coffee.
But this is the thing. So a lot of people just look at the spec and they're like, "Oh yeah, no, this has been able to do this for so long. Wow, this is nothing new." And it's just like, it's not exactly the same. Like, you've not tested this out. You've not put it side by side. This is something that, you know, is actually a pretty good feature. Now, before I go into let's talk a bit about the performance, because it's A18 Pro, right? So I mean, for me, it's been smooth sailing, absolutely fine. And one thing that I do like is that I can play console level games. So, you know, Assassin's Creed Mirage, right? Okay, I mean, yes, it's not going to be exactly the same as, you know, playing it on the ROG Ally X or, you know, on your Xbox or PlayStation. But having that on your smartphone is pretty damn cool.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that was a genius idea from Apple to just differentiate itself from every other phone manufacturer, but also show what that kind of performance is. Yeah, to be fair, it's more like a PS2 level, you know, maybe even slightly PS3. But one thing I noticed with the performance is I didn't feel the performance was that drastic from last year to this year. I feel like it was maybe a 10 to 15% bump. But I also found that the difference between A18 Pro and A18 was also closer than what we've usually had in the past. I think we also get into a certain plateau again with performance where, you know, kind of like the back of our devices, there's only so much you can actually push until we get through a certain breakthrough where then hopefully at some point we can get like the PS5 level into a smartphone. But, you know, that's going to be a lot of power in your hands.
I mean, the thing is, you know, you mentioned something interesting there that, you know, there's not much of a gap between the iPhone 16 regular and the Pros, right? Okay, performance-wise, they're all pretty good, whereas previously we've had more of a gap. And I think obviously the reason for that is Apple Intelligence. They've wanted, you know, and let's talk about Apple Intelligence because, you know, Apple have said that these devices are built for Apple Intelligence ground up. However, on launch, we don't have Apple Intelligence, which kind of makes it difficult to, you know, fully utilize the devices. All right, so you've got the beta, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now, because I use it as one of my primary devices, I don't put the beta on, but the fact is that, you know, as far as I'm hearing recently, in terms of rumors and stuff, that it's going to be coming in waves as well. So yeah, we know Apple Intelligence is coming in October in the US, and then, you know, it's going to be English US, and then it's going to roll out. But also the features are going to be rolled out slowly, right? Mm-hmm. So this is the thing, like anybody buying the iPhone right now, and I think it reflects in the views as well, like in terms of views on YouTube and stuff like that, people are like, oh yeah, it's cool. But it's like, it's not really, you know, like if it launched with Apple Intelligence out of the box, which is, I believe, what Apple were hoping to do, but for whatever reason, they've not been able to do that. It's going to be coming soon. It's just kind of taken away a bit of that shine from it.
Yeah.
What are you, so you having the beta, what do you think? Like, what have you been using? Is there anything that stands out?
I've been a bit disappointed with Apple Intelligence. I honestly have. It works. Siri is definitely much better. I'm not really a Siri user, but testing it out and using it in different situations it is. But it's also limited. And what I found with Apple Intelligence, some of the features like the changing your conversation style while, you know, sending a message or an email, that stuff is really cool, but it feels really behind in comparison to other AIs or smart intelligence. And I had to try to stack it against Samsung, you know, and I went, to be fair, I think Samsung has done a really good job with instituting some things that I feel were just eye-catching. It's not gimmicky. The translate feature, for instance, you know, being able to translate messages for you while you're texting somebody, or a phone call, you know, if you call a restaurant in a different country. That's a very simple thing. Circle to search, which, yes, it's a Google thing, but again, that launched with the S24 Ultra. That's the thing that I think caught my attention. I agree that Apple was trying to go with a more subtle, like AI will run in the background approach for you and not, you know, will not disturb your regular flow. But it really feels like from what I showed, when I've showed, friends, I showed my wife, they're like, huh. My wife kind of mentioned like GPT because we went to Japan and we used ChatGPT to conversate with a bartender, and he was quite impressed because, we could actually keep a conversation going. That's the kind of stuff that I think is missing from this, to feel like, why am I making that upgrade? And it will definitely come. Those things will come. But you're right. Off the bat, it just feels lacking in that regard.
Incomplete.
Yes.
I think that's the word there, is incomplete. That, it's here. Yes, it's got some cool features. Yes, it's, the camera upgrades are pretty good, but, the fundamental thing that we kept hearing was that it's built ground up for Apple Intelligence, and that's something that's not here. Of course, we'll revisit when we do have Apple Intelligence, and we'll kind of talk a bit more about it. But as it stands, we can only, talk about what we've had so far. iOS 18, I mean, the customizations, I have changed my home screen around, but you know what's just really frustrating for me when it comes to the icons? It's just, they're so spaced out. Like, you've got a massive display. You could have iOS 18 on the iPhone mini and then the Pro Max, and then it's still going to be this, pretty much the same layout. Like, let's utilize that space. I want 5 columns, right? Okay. These are the sort of things that are a little bit sort of, like frustrating. There's one of the features that I was super excited to try out for iOS 18, and that's, the motion sickness one, where it puts dots on your screen, and then it didn't work for me whatsoever. I still felt the same sickness. It's so funny. It's just like, I just tried it, and I was like, nope, this does not work for me. It might work for some people. For me personally, didn't work whatsoever. Anything in iOS 18 that stands out to you?
The customization of the home screen to me is the one I've just been dying for the longest time. And when at first I didn't get it, why it looked odd to me, until you just mentioned it now. It's like, I don't know.
It's so spaced out.
Yeah.
It is so spaced out.
So I think one of the things that I still am waiting for is, one of the reactions I got from my wife and from Hayato is, they didn't like the new customization setup because they felt like it wasn't very Apple-esque. They felt like it was Apple trying to copy Android and not Apple trying to make it feel natural. And I think one of the things I've said in the past is, I believe it's time for iOS to get a full rehaul. It needs to change, because right now it's just adding things, and some things don't necessarily mesh well. One of the best things is when you go into an application, you want to go back. You can't swipe back in certain apps. So, it's like certain locations, you have to go to the top corner. Why? Yeah. So that's my thing, is like, I feel like some of these additions are good, but I think a full refresh is needed soon.
I'll tell you, right, that's not going to happen. This is the thing, because it's familiar, they kind of have to like tweak it enough to make it updated, but not too different, because it still has to remain familiar to iOS users who are used to it.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm not disagreeing with that, but there are ways you can do it where things become familiar, but you make a fundamental change, which they've done in the past. But I think it's time for that again. It's still, as long as it looks the same, but functionality now is like, hey, here's an easier way for you to do it. Apple can market this stuff well. They can do it.
Right, now let's talk about the battery life. So for me, the 16 Pro Max has had very good battery life, better than the iPhone 15 Pro Max, and also better than the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. Now, my comparison of the iPhone 16 Pro Max versus the S24 Ultra, I was getting a lot of hate in the comments because people have been seeing battery drain tests, and they've been saying, oh, in this so-and-so test, the S24 Ultra lasted longer, and this other battery drain test, the iPhone lasted longer. I don't like battery drain tests generally. The only one that I actually, would say is very accurate is from PhoneBuff. He kind of uses machines, and he does, I would say, the closest real world examples of how battery drain would be, because obviously it varies from person to person. For me, however, I would say it's been very good and better than the S24 Ultra and the iPhone 15 Pro Max. Next up, we have the Galaxy S24FE. We've both had it for about a week now. It was a bit of a surprise, I'm going to say, because I didn't really hear about it or any leaks or rumors, and then suddenly, Samsung got in touch and said, hey, do you want a device before launch? I was like, yeah, sure. And mine was the first unboxing online. But it's an interesting device. The first thing we're going to talk about is the display, because my comments were full with, look at those bezels, right? So I think it's less the size of the bezels and more that they're not uniform because you have a slightly larger bezel in the chin, right? And I think that's something that a lot of people are just not being happy about. Apart from that, it's a good display, right? It's AMOLED, it's bright, you've got 120 hertz. Yes, it's not LTPO, so it only goes down to 60 hertz and 120 hertz, full HD. But it's a good display apart from the bezels. Do those matter much to you, Anupam?
I mean, no, not really though. I think what was more interesting is the fact that this is 6.7 inches and it's not a Galaxy S24 to S24 FE. This is more like a plus to an FE.
Yeah. So it's a Galaxy S24 FE plus S24 plus FE, right?
Yeah.
I agree. I think it was because if you, I mean, we'll talk about the price a little bit later, but then it kind of becomes too close to the S24, and it's like, I'll just rather buy the S24, right?
Yeah.
Whereas now it kind of gives it a bit more separation. Now, tested the cameras actually pretty good, right? And I think, with the new image signal processor, lots of detail, dynamic range, pretty good cameras overall. But the other thing that was quite controversial is the Exynos 2400, right? A lot of people were hoping for the 8 Gen 3, but that's not the case. It's the Exynos 2400. Okay, as a gaming man, I know you've done a gaming test on it. What would you say?
Exynos 2400 is fine. To me, I think if you're going to go Exynos, the price needs to be lower. I think that's also where that correlation comes into play. The Exynos will do a good job with all games. Genshin, it still doesn't run fully at 60, but it's better. It's much better than what Google is doing with Tensor. Let's just put it that way.
Okay.
But I also realized that, what most people were hoping for was, I believe the S22FE, or maybe it was a 20, I can't remember which one, used the previous Snapdragon chipset, which would make most people happy. Where if we did like a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, most people would be like, oh, okay, cool, because this is the fan edition, this budget, so it would make sense there.
Let's just talk at the price, because $650, £650, not really budget, right? I think a lot of people were expecting around $550, right? So $650 starting price, because this is where it becomes quite tricky, because you've got the S24, right, which you could get now because it's been out for a few months now, like almost 8-9 months now. You could get some good deals on it, so you might be able to actually get it for around that price, right? Devices like the OnePlus 12. So I was just looking at the price of the OnePlus 12 right now. It's $800 for the 256 version, right? So $100 more, but then you get the free watch with it, which is worth like $250, right? So then you're like kind of looking, okay, you've got these other devices here. The competition is pretty rough. Is it a good price point? I think that's the key thing there, right? Is that it should have been lower. I think $550. What do you reckon?
I believe $550, but I think one of the biggest things that Samsung is missing out is it's a fan edition phone, right?
Yeah.
What makes it feel like a fan edition phone from it, right? From packaging to what's inside, it just looks like a regular S series packaging, right? That's, I think, even the bigger problem, because if Samsung, like you said, like you just mentioned OnePlus has the watch in there, or if there was something that made it feel like, oh, Samsung really wants to, as a fan, to get this device, you can justify that $650 if you had, I don't know, maybe the watch from last year or something like that. Something to make fans go, yes, okay, cool, I'll get this.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I mean, one thing that I will say that I was pretty happy about is that there's no compromise on Galaxy AI. You've got all of the Galaxy AI features, from live call translate to circle to search to even drawing assist, right? Which I find that's the most probably fun AI feature, where you can just draw things and change your hairstyle, whatever you want to do. You've got all of that there on the FE, so you're not missing out on that. However, when it comes to the hardware and everything, I think it's a tricky place, because, if you look at some deals on the S24 Plus even, right, you're getting it for around, the $800 mark. You'll be able to pick it up for, and it's just like, okay, now 256 version, you compare it to, the 256 version of the S24 FE, you're like, it's $100 difference. Like, why not just go for the real deal? Like, instead of just, if it was $200, then fair enough. It makes it a little bit more appealing. But that's what I would say. Battery life, it's improved. You've got 4,700 milliamp hour battery now. It's got all of the 25 watts charging. Not crazy, not amazing, but not bad. But I don't know, it's a difficult one. And, I think that reflects that with the audience. I agree with you. There's not really much that makes it the fan edition that we would have hoped.
Yeah, I think Samsung needs to really look at what they're doing there with the fan edition devices because, there's no need for it at this point, unless it fulfills a need where it's got some cool colors, packaging, extras, even if it's fan points, like I get you're making a fan edition, but there's nothing that screams fan when it's a black box and there's nothing else inside there.
It's more of a Samsung Galaxy S24 Plus Lite, right?
Yes.
That's more what it is, right? So it's just like, hey, this is like pretty much like the S24 Plus, but we're gonna not give you the same screen. We're gonna give you slightly thicker bezels. We're not gonna give you as much of a big battery, et cetera, right? So then they kind of like cut a few things down here. You're not gonna get a Snapdragon version. It's just gonna be Exynos across the board and stuff like that. But it's just like, yeah, okay, that's fine. You want to do that, but I think in the space where you've got $400-500 devices with uniform bezels, having that just kind of throws people off straight away because a lot of people were saying in the comments, this looks like an A series device. Is this the A50 something? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so that's the thing. That's what I found a lot of. So I think, maybe some people will still like it. Maybe you're going to get a good deal on it. They've got some decent pre-order deals, not amazing, I would say. You're getting like 50% off the buds and things like that, but nothing that really stands out, I would say.
I agree. I absolutely agree. I think they need to rethink what they want to do with it. And also, to me, the way it was launched and how we just kind of got that last minute, like, hey,
it's like, hey,
tells us that they need to make some changes.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Final topic, Huawei Mate XT. I mean, wow. Just wow. Like world's first tri-foldable smartphone. It's a 6.4-inch screen when you see it, okay? Then it opens up. And then you have a 7.9-inch dual pane, right? And then opens up again, and then you've got a 10.2-inch tablet, which completely falls flat. I mean, let's take a moment. Just Huawei, you have just smashed it. That is absolutely insane. 3.6 millimeters thin when it's unfolded. And when it's folded, it's only 12.8 millimeters, which is only a little bit more compared to the Z Fold 6, which is around 12.1 millimeters. Like, from an engineering point of view, it's just amazing what they've managed to achieve on here, right? I'm not even going into the practicalities of how would you use it and stuff like, I mean, just amazing, right? So credit to Huawei where it's given. Like that was, as soon as I saw that, the first impressions, I was like, wow. What about you?
Look, it's an amazing device. And again, I'm going to use my wife as an example here because when I showed her the iPhone, I told you how she described certain things. And then she said, give me the Huawei. And literally, that's when I knew that. I mean, my wife is a diehard iPhone user. She's like, give me the Huawei. I want to try that out. I want to see how it is. That was impressive from them and a good gambit, especially they announced us the same day the iPhone launched, I believe. And also the engineering feats, the size, the thinness, the fact that it's a very functioning device and that whichever way you use it, it doesn't feel like a brick. If it's as thick as the Z Fold 6, then it pretty much feels like a device that you can constantly use. The one thing I'll say is the people who are probably crying right now, Samsung engineers. The reason I say this is 3 years ago, they showcased a triple folding device, not as thin, but this was like Samsung Display had showcased that. And they were like, yeah, we could do so many things with devices like that. And I remember everybody was like, that's not practical. And Huawei said, hold my beer, we got this.
Yeah. Now, this is the thing with Huawei. Like, it's such a shame. Like, we don't need to go into the politics of why they were banned and stuff like that. But it's such a shame because I loved, even if you didn't buy a Huawei device, right? Okay, you're never gonna buy one. That's fine. The competition that they brought to the market just alone really pushed others, right? And this is where we've talked about this many times before, that Samsung has gotten lazy when it comes to the Fold device because they just didn't have enough competition, right? So it's just like, yeah, we're getting incremental update over incremental update each year, whereas when we look at the Asian markets, we've got these amazing feats of engineering that are just like, wow, right? And there's not been that wow factor on the Fold devices from Samsung for a while, and that's because, it's such a shame, man. I wish that didn't happen, and I wish at least they were here in terms of, at least for the competition.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. I think they bring a lot of innovation and just push. They did, when they were at least in the competitive market in the US and Europe then, they pushed a lot of things that everybody was like, oh, we have to get that too, or make it better. And seeing them doing this leapfrog, this is also the best way for most brands to really fight up competition. If you're behind, if you don't have that market share, Huawei's like, you know what? We can make another slab, or we could just give you a tablet that's a phone, and we'll showcase something different. And it got so many people's attention to the point that it's currently selling at about $5,000 or $6,000 on eBay right now.
Yeah, this is why. So like, people were asking me, "Oh, are you gonna cover it?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's probably not."
Because the device, I believe, is almost $3,000, or is it? Or
so in terms of Chinese yuan, it's about 20,000. Which if you do a direct USD comparison, it's about 2,800. But obviously, if you were to buy it, then there would be taxes and all sorts involved and stuff. So I'd say you're looking at around $3,000 or around 2,700, 2,800 pounds if you were able to buy it.
Yeah.
But because it's people are just so crazy about it, so unless Huawei actually send me a device to cover, like a loan device, I don't think I'm gonna be spending 6,000 pounds or dollars to try to get it into the studio.
Yeah, no, same thing. I reached out to somebody who was going to China. I was like, if you're there, can you buy it for me? At retail, cool. And he's like, I couldn't find any retail, and even the shops that had it were charging 6,000 USD. I was like, really? He's like, yeah, I saw it in stores, but they were like, yeah, $6,000, you want it?
So this is the thing. Here's the thing. I think, as you were saying, for Huawei, it's not a device that they're expecting to, like sell masses of. I wouldn't think. It's more just to get the attention, right?
Yeah.
It's like, look at what we can do. Take a look at this. You think you have nice foldables? Check this out, right? And I think that's it's more of a statement piece, right? Because practically, again, like we're giving it all praise and it's all due, but remember that foldable screen is still going to be going in and out of your pocket. So how durable is it going to be? And this was the same, kind of questions we had with the Huawei Mate X when it initially came out, right? That you have the outer folding display, but it's not protected because it's not going to be as good as normal Gorilla Glass or Gorilla Victus, whatever you want to call it, right? That you have on other devices. It's still going to be a foldable display. So that's something, again, we can't really comment on right now in terms of how practical it's going to be, but it has definitely achieved the initial hype that Huawei were aiming for. The other thing that, I was looking at, it's got the Kirin 9010, which is 9010, what would you call it, right? But it's a 7nm chip, right? From what I was doing a bit of research online, and it's kind of comparable to the 7 Gen 3. So it's not like a flagship chip, right? And that's, again, because of all of the issues of Huawei not being able to get the latest chips, like the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 and things like that. There's all of that sort of politics behind it and stuff. But, I want to emphasize that I think that's not the point. The point is just, here's what we can do. And I think they've achieved that.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think it's one of those things that hopefully, in my mind, is what does this do for the likes of Samsung? I saw a rumor that says Samsung might be launching a rollable OLED next, foldable next year, something like that. But it's not just about rolling out something to compete. One of the good things about this,
rolling out. Wink, wink. Sorry, I had to do that.
One of the things I loved about this launch from Huawei is that, at least on the surface, it looked like a complete device. It looked like, despite whatever is running internally and all that stuff, when you see people opening it up, whether it's, 2 screens, 3 screens, the whole thing, and closing it, it functions really well. And that's what, whether it's Samsung or any of the other manufacturers, or like a OnePlus 2, right, wants to compete. You can't make something that just like, oh, here's our own version, or here's a different thing. We've got to have a device that's fleshed out, that feels solid. So,
this is kind of like the opposite of what we were talking about earlier in the podcast, where we were saying, the beauty is on the inside. This is more like, don't worry about the inside. You can be shallow as hell, but look at the outside. Look how hot she is.
Exactly.
It's the opposite.
And Huawei has it in 2 colors, right? Red, nice and shiny, and then a black is like nice and simply stated. So what? Let it all out. Let it shine. Let the beauty come out.
That's it. And, I mean, to be fair, it's got a decent sized battery as well. So over 5,000 milliamps, 66 watt wide charging, 50 watts of wireless charging, reverse wireless charging as well. They've managed to fit all of that in there. And again, we have to emphasize, like, practically, we can't tell you, we can't give you the experience because we've not, had it hands on. We've not used it and stuff like that for days and weeks and stuff. We don't know how that screen's going to fare on the outside, but as an engineering feat, like, it's amazing. Like, it's so good to see this, because this will drive, hopefully, others to do things that will eventually be practical down the line, right? A few years. Let's see.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's all we have time for today in episode number 40. Hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, don't forget to subscribe on the YouTube channel, hit that bell icon, and like, and also rate on your favorite podcast streaming platform. It helps others listen to it as well. I've been your host, Saf, alongside my co-host,
Thunder E from Board at Work.
and we'll see you next month.
Bye.